Hey everyone, Tony D with another hot take, and this one is about woke sci-fi. I just watched the video for Victor von Doomcock. If you haven't seen Victor's, shut up, Joan. I'm trying to do a video. If you haven't seen Victor's channel, Joan, quiet. If you haven't seen Victor's channel, it's really good. He's got a new video up called Cultural Apocalypse, and basically he talks about how Star Trek, Star Wars, and Doctor Who have gone woke, and basically gone woke right off a cliff. You should watch his video. It's really cool. It kind of follows the deconstruction of those three franchises. They've been deconstructed. They've been deconstructed by their current franchise holders, owners, whatever you want to call them. And this reminds me of a couple things. First thing it reminds me of is Dave Sim did a great issue of Spawn, believe it or not. It's Spawn number 9. And in it, he does this great bit about characters that are owned by their creators and characters that aren't. And at the end of the comic, Spawn, who is still owned by Todd McFarlane, is free. And so is Cerebus. I call him Cerebus. I know, Cerebus or whatever you want to call him. But and then he has this shot of a cell, a prison cell of the other characters, and you can see it's like Batman's arm and Spider-Man's arm and all the other famous comic book heroes. And it's true, they're trapped because they're trapped in their franchises. And just like the trifecta of sci-fi, comic books too are in that mix. They've gone woke. And, they're being slowly dismantled. The other thing this reminds me of is what Jordan Peterson says about cultural Marxism. And that is, it all goes back to Foucault. And basically, it just deconstructs everything. We talk about this in Wokistan, a novel. And the idea behind it is nothing matters. Nothing is real. Traditions don't matter. Gender, race, religion, none of those things matter. Nothing matters. Nothing matters. And for the cultural Marxist or the extremist, they want to deconstruct everything. Everything will be deconstructed. Even the stuff that is woke now won't be woke enough for these people. And even the next generation of woke stuff still won't be woke enough. It won't be until everything's completely unraveled and that we can start over, that they will be satisfied. And of course, they have no real plan for starting over. There's none. Because there's only this, well, everything's wrong, therefore it all has to be deconstructed, and then after that, profit, as the underwear gnomes would say. The reality is this. And Victor points his call to action is basically vote with your wallet, stop giving these companies your wallet. I would take it a slightly larger step, a further step. I think you have to punish these guys a lot harder than that. And what I mean is you can't just say, well, I'm not going to watch, woke Star Wars, but I am going to watch The Mandalorian. No, I'm not watching any Star Wars anymore. I'm done. I'm completely done with Star Wars. And that's the only way. Kathleen Kennedy, you notice, one of the key, I guess you would call her movers and shakers of Star Wars, she is still in power. She's still there. So nothing has essentially changed. The only thing that has changed is she's just going to move the pieces around a little bit and tell her bosses, well, we had a little bit of a bumpy ride, but it'll be fine, basically. I mean, what would you say if you were working? You tell your boss what you need to tell them, and then you continue to work until they fire you, or, you want to make as much money as possible. So it's not just enough to stop watching Star Wars or to go online and complain about Star Wars or whatever. You have to cut Star Wars out. You have to cut Star Trek out. And you have to cut Doctor Who out. Like, forever. Because essentially, in order to undo the damage. So, like, I came up with a plot that you can undo the damage of Doctor Who. Doctor Who would be pretty easy. He's a Time Lord, and he travels through time, and through various time travel things. You could come up with a plot in which, yeah, like everything you saw in the female Doctor Who seasons was completely wrong and weird, and it was an alternate universe or whatever. I mean, you could pretty much do that with all the franchises and just say, well, it was an alternate universe, or well, we're ignoring this or whatever. With Doctor Who, it would kind of work. With the rest of the franchises, they're pretty much dead. What you have to understand is stories are about people. Star Trek wasn't about going to new planets. It was about three guys named Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And that was their heyday. And everything after that was not as great. Now, I would argue that DS9, Deep Space Nine, was a pretty good show. It started strong, stronger than Next Generation, and ended fairly strong. Probably should have gone another season, but whatever. Next Generation was okay. Wasn't, you can basically throw out the first season and a half. But you're not going to get these back, okay? Star Wars especially, Star Wars was, it's over. Star Wars is done. It's really over after Return of the Jedi. I mean, back in the old days, we sat around and complained about Return of the Jedi. I mean, it was pretty much done then. So, it's no mystery what needs to be done. And I've been saying this for years. Stop giving these companies your money. Stop giving them your money. Now, this isn't going to be easy for a lot of people. But you have to look at it this way. Back in the day, Star Wars, Star Trek, all this sci-fi stuff, it wasn't mainstream at all. It was very niche. It was the kind of stuff you'd go into a bookstore, you'd be lucky to find one book related to Star Wars or Doctor Who or Star Trek. It would be mostly mainstream stuff. And mainstream stuff included, what everybody likes, cars and politics and drama and all that kind of stuff. Sci-fi wasn't for everybody. It was only for us nerds. That's changed. They have mainstreamed nerddom. And part of the reason for that is the nerd fan base was very loyal. We were particular, and it was niche, and niche enough that we stayed together as these other audiences atomized. So if you look at, say, people who are big fans of soap operas, there's so much content for people who are into soap operas or soap opera-like stories. I mean, it's just endless. It's endless now. You've got the Hallmark Channel. You've got still network television still does soap operas. You've got soap opera magazine. I mean, it's just endless amount of stuff. They have soap opera conventions, believe it or not. So, there's so much content, like you can't make your bones in that anymore. It's just too much. And because these companies own the big soap operas, they're never going to let them go. There's no reason to let them go. They've crunched the numbers, they've crunched the formula, and they just basically, in my opinion, would rotate the same sort of stories through. They are attempting to start to do that with sci-fi. They're gonna crunch the numbers and figure it out, and they're just gonna rotate through the stories. A lot of it will be based on old Star Trek and stuff like that. You'll do your mirror episode. You'll do your episode where they have to escape a planet before it blows up. You'll do your Wrath of Khan episode. They'll come up with all these tropes, and then once they have enough of them, they'll just roll out new sci-fi stuff, and they'll just punch your buttons. Now, you, being older and a more discerning viewer, probably watching this would say, well, I'm not going to watch that crap. Of course you're not. However, to an 8-year-old kid who's never seen old Star Trek or even new Star Trek, that's going to be all new road. So that's why you have so much derivative content. And the only way to really send a message, we're not going to tolerate this anymore, is you have to drive these companies out of business as much as possible. You have to leave them behind. And so if you have Disney Plus just because you're watching The Mandalorian or you're just watching WandaVision or you found one show that you really like and it's probably really good, you got to unplug, man. You got to unplug, in my view. I say boycott them all. Boycott everything Star Wars. Boycott everything Doctor Who. Boycott everything Star Trek. Boycott all these big franchises. And look to find creators doing their own thing. And they're out there. They're all over the internet. My God, I just joined a writing community not too long ago on Twitter, and the books are just endless. Endless books. And if books aren't your thing, get on YouTube and look for some local guys doing a zombie show or a sci-fi show. They're out there. The Star Wars fans and Star Trek fans, they have their own websites and movies and whatnot. I would not recommend them because, again, you're kind of indirectly supporting the franchises. I'm not knocking those guys. Look, they're fans and they love it, and I'm not saying you're bad people for doing what you're doing, but I think you're wasting your time. You are putting your time and energy into something that you don't own, and you could be doing original stories. You can do original stories, and they could be similar. There's no, look, it's going to be similar. If you're going to do a sci-fi show, it's going to be a little similar to something. It's going to be a little similar to Star Trek or a little similar to The Expanse or whatever. I mean, look, if they could do the Orville, which is essentially the next generation with like different aliens, I think you can do your own version of Star Trek. And you can go in different directions with it, I mean, if you're going to do your own version of Star Trek, you can do things like, Star Trek was a utopia. Earth was a utopia. Maybe my Star Trek, there is no utopia. Maybe there's still a lot of, problems back on Earth. You could also do something where, there are no alien races. There's just humans, just different humans. There's lots you can do. Your imagination is endless. The franchises, they're very limited. And part of the issue is that out in Hollywood, the people who do these things are the sons and daughters of the last people who did these things. And they were the sons and daughters of those people. So you've got the sons and daughters of rich people running around LA pitching this stuff, and they're pitching it to other legacies who didn't really earn their bones. Back in the 40s, there was still guys who had to make their bones out in Hollywood. And so when television rolled in and they upped their production in TV, it was a real business, done by real people who had built the movie industry, and they knew what it was like to work. And all through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the people who worked in television, they understood how television worked and learned a few things and built television to where it is. Those people are all retired or dead, and so the people you have now grew up on this stuff, and it's just like in the world of comics, So many of the artists I've seen, they just draw from other artists. They're not particularly talented. You ask them to draw a truck or a horse, and they can't do it. They can't do it freehand. They're not really artists. They're comic book fanboys who ape, their heroes. And to some extent, there's nothing wrong with that. But you gotta make your bones. You gotta draw a horse. You gotta draw a truck. You gotta draw the things you need to draw. And so comics, the same thing. I mean, the people. It's so incestuous in LA, in the publishing world, in entertainment in general. Because what you have to understand is, to be in the, even me, I mean, like, I'm not a rich guy, but I was, I was insulated somewhat, and as a creative person, I needed to be in order to do some of my work. But it also hurt me in that it it didn't give me the skills I needed to make enough money. And it left me distant from people who actually worked for a living. So these people, the people who are in the business, who have been handed everything, and I've met some of these people. They have no idea what's funny, no idea what's good, no idea what it's like to work for a living. Look at the subject matter they portray on TV shows and movies. Look at the topics they talk about. It's not about survival. It's not about always being broke. They don't know what that's like. Even the writers, half of them don't know what it's like to be broke. They couldn't write a show like Trailer Park Boys. That show could not be written in a big studio in Hollywood. The guys they would hire wouldn't be able to do it. That's why, like, that show resonates in Canada, where the guys who are working that show, they're just regular guys, because in Canadian TV, you're like way down. You're living like normal people. People in LA, they don't live like normal people. Trust me, they're living in this bizarro world. And so getting back to the political end of it, the Marxism that's been inserted in here, it's just a trend. It's just a trend. And like all trends in Hollywood, it dies hard. But you have to make it die. You have to hasten this. You have to, at every turn, cut them off and don't watch and don't buy. Don't buy the toys. Don't buy the comics. Don't buy anything. And if you have any opportunity to voice your opposition, you voice it and you say, I have zero interest in this. I don't want any of this. I am sick of this. Return stuff if you can. You have to send a message to these people that you're not going to watch anything with politics in it. Not this kind of politics. I think this is going to turn probably within the next year, possibly next year after the election. The dam's just going to break, and this stuff is going to be labeled as, wow, this really doesn't make any money for us anymore. And then they're going to jump to the next thing, whatever that is. I suspect the next thing's going to be being anti-woke, because they're going to look to find the next big sizable audience, and they're going to find a huge amount of fanboys in the anti-woke camp. Just sitting around watching videos like this, watching Victor Von Dooncock and complaining about this shit, and wanting to really see, something classic, something good, something that doesn't, check your privilege every 10 seconds in the damn plot. I mean, I just don't waste my time with a show like Doctor Who now. The moment I heard they were going to put a woman in the lead role, I said, that's not going to be any good. Because there was no reason for it. There was no reason whatsoever to change the sex of Doctor Who. None. Zero. None. Argue about it if you can with me, but there's no creative reason to do that. Just none. And now they've tainted the history, so the only thing you could do is go back and undo it. That's the only option. And you're never going to do that. Because even if guys get in there who are anti-woke, they're just going to be like, no, we just don't talk about that. And, the people who are going to be at that level, they're just going to keep making it, and they're just going to pretend that era doesn't exist. And then maybe, if they're still making Doctor Who 5-10 years from now, they might go back and make a joke about how woke it was in that era or whatever, but you're never going to see a retconning and getting rid of this stuff. They just won't bother. The only time I've ever seen them do something like that was DC Comics actually let Kevin Smith, he somehow wrote this, and it's a terrible issue, not because of Kevin, but because he does this. He basically goes through Green Arrow and kind of fixes the continuity. And this was a few years ago, so I'm sure it's probably messed up by now. But he fixes the continuity, and it's so convoluted and so messed up. But he manages to fix it in a weird, convoluted, comic booky way, and then you could move on from there. And that's what they would need to do with Doctor Who, with Star Trek, and it would be a terrible, terrible episode to fix. It'd be a terrible movie to fix Star Wars. Like, you'd have to go through all the crap that half people wouldn't have seen or hated, and then explain, okay, well, this doesn't matter because this Rey really wasn't a Jedi, and all this stuff doesn't matter because of this. And then you'd get to the end of it and say, okay, now. Nobody wants to do that. So you have to just put on your big boy pants and say, Star Wars, Star Trek, and Doctor Who are dead. We need new Star Wars, Star Trek, and Doctor Who. And they're out there. The Expanse is out there. And they haven't ruined that yet. There are other things that have yet to be discovered. And like our heroes in these, sci-fi worlds, we need to go where no man has gone before. Explore, fanboys. Explore.